Some houses hold laughter in the walls. Others hold secrets. Mine held both, but over time the secret swallowed the laughter whole. My name is Georgia Hollis. I'm 76 years old. I live in a little yellow house with a cracked porch swing and hydrangeas that bloom blue every summer. No matter how bad the winter's been. Folks around here say I have the best cobbler in 3 counties. They see me as Miss Georgia, the old widow who trims her roses just right and waves to children as they ride by on bicycles. But what they don't see are the ghosts. I never married again after Warren. Never wanted to. Never needed to. My children are grown now, scattered across the country living good lives with good people. Lives I fought hard to give them, though they'd never know just how hard. You see, there's a story I've never told. Not to my pastor. Not to my children. Not even to the mirror. But today I'm going to tell it. Not because I need pity, but because someone out there might be living in their own quiet house. And they need to know they're not alone. I was born in 1947, in a town smaller than a memory, Jasper Hollow, Tennessee. Just 3 rows of houses, a Baptist church, and a general store that sold everything from cornmeal to coffins. My mama Delilah was soft-voiced and sunflower-hearted. She loved to hum while she cooked, and she'd always press a peppermint into my palm after dinner. My daddy Hank was the town's sheriff. A tall man with a voice like thunder and eyes like iron. Folks admired him, trusted him. Men stood when he entered a room. Women straightened their aprons. He was Sheriff Hollis, keeper of law and order, protector of the peace. But at home, peace had a different face. It looked like silence. It smelled like boot polish and whiskey breath. It moved in small, controlled ways, tightened jaw, clenching fist, the slow unbuckling of a belt. People say trauma lives in the body. They're right. To this day, the sound of boots on wooden floorboards makes my chest tighten. Back then, no one questioned a man like Hank Hollis. He paid his bills, went to church, tipped his hat. In a town where respect was earned through fear, he was a king. And we, in that small white house on Oak Ridge Street, were his silent court. Mama never left. Never even talked about it. She'd whisper, "It's just how men are raised around here, sugar." But I could see it in her eyes, the dimming light, the quiet panic. She started burning the biscuits more often. Started humming less. When I turned 9, I stopped being a little girl and started becoming invisible. I learned how to read faces like road maps. Each twitch of his brow a storm warning. I kept my head down. I got good at being quiet. At disappearing into corners. The day Mama died was the day the laughter left the house for good. She collapsed in the kitchen while boiling beans. Stroke, the doctor said. No warning. No chance. I remember staring at her hands, the ones that had held me through fevers and scraped knees, now lifeless and open on the cold linoleum floor. Daddy didn't cry. He just stood there, jaw clenched, then walked out to the porch and lit a cigarette. At the funeral, he held my hand like nothing had changed. But everything had. That summer the house felt bigger. Colder. I moved into Mama's room because I couldn't bear to sleep in mine. And that's when it started. The slow unraveling of my world. First it was just small things. Him asking me to wear her apron. Calling me Lila when the light was low. Telling neighbors I was taking over her duties now. But then one night he knocked on my door. Not as a father. Not even as a man. But as a monster in the body of someone I once loved. And from that night on, Oak Ridge Street became the quietest street in town. Because no one ever heard me scream. And if they did, they never asked. So now I sit here. An old woman with silver curls and a story I swore I'd bury forever. But secrets don't stay buried, honey. They grow roots. And some nights I feel them under my bed. So I'm telling this. All of it. Not just for me. But for that young girl out there who doesn't know how to escape. Or worse, for the one who thinks she can't. Before everything fell apart, my world was simple. It smelled like cornbread baking in the oven. It sounded like a hymn being hummed on the porch. It felt like my mama's hands wrapping around mine as she showed me how to sew a straight line on her old Singer machine. My mama, Delilah Hollis, was the kind of woman who believed in grace even when life gave her gravel. She could stretch $1 like magic and made molasses cookies soft as clouds. She had a way of tilting her head when she listened, like your words were the most important thing in the room. And her hands, those gentle working hands, could calm any storm inside me. She wasn't loud. She wasn't showy. But Mama had a kind of quiet strength that made you believe the world could still be kind. When I was 6, I broke my wrist falling from the swing. I remember the panic in Daddy's face as he rushed me to the clinic. He wasn't always cruel back then. He held me close and whispered, "You'll be okay, baby girl." That was the last time I remember him calling me that. As I grew, the sweetness faded. Daddy changed. Or maybe he always was that way and I just grew old enough to see through the shine. Maybe Mama saw it before I did. Maybe she stayed to protect me. But no matter how much she tried to hide it, the signs were there. I remember once when I was 10, I came home from school to find Mama with a bruise under her eye. She said she'd walked into the doorframe. But I knew. And I knew that she knew that I knew. She never said a word. Just pulled me close and said, "Baby, sometimes love means surviving the storm so your babies don't have to." Back then I didn't understand. Now I wish I didn't. Daddy was a man who commanded respect. Not because he earned it with kindness, but because he demanded it with fear. He polished his boots every Sunday morning before church until they shone like mirrors. The sound of them on the floorboards became a warning bell. 1, 2, 3 steps from the kitchen to the hallway. 4 steps to my door. Mama used to say, "When he walks heavy, you walk quiet." She said it with a smile like it was a game. But it wasn't a game. It was survival. He kept order. He kept rules. He kept Mama on edge and me in silence. But still she never left. Never ran. Some nights I'd hear her whispering to God by the windowsill, rosary clutched in her hand. I asked her once why she stayed. She said, "Because you're here. And as long as I'm here, he won't touch you." She kept that promise. Right up until the day the truck ran that red light and Mama never came home. Losing her felt like falling down a well, silent, endless, and dark. The house changed overnight. No more humming in the kitchen. No more Bible on the nightstand. No more peppermint after dinner. And Daddy? He didn't cry. He didn't even sit at the funeral. He stood at the back, arms crossed, jaw set like stone. When the preacher asked if anyone wanted to speak, he said, "She knew her place. She knew her duty. God rest her soul." That was it. The next morning he put his boots on and said, "You'll do now. Keep the fire going and dinner hot. And for God's sake, don't burn the biscuits." And then he left for work. Just like that. I was 14, barely a woman, and already being handed an apron that didn't fit. I washed her dresses and hung them outside to dry, knowing one day he'd tell me to wear them. I cooked her recipes, watching the clock so he wouldn't come home to a cold plate. I memorized his routines like a soldier in a war she didn't sign up for. There's a photo I keep tucked inside my Bible. It's Mama standing in front of our house, holding me as a baby. She's smiling, squinting against the sun, one hand shielding her eyes. You can't see the bruises in that picture. But I know they were there. You just learn to smile through them. That photo is the only thing I have left of her. That, and her voice in my head on the hardest nights. "You're stronger than you think, Georgia. And one day you'll get out." Back then I didn't believe her. Back then I didn't think it was possible. But if you keep listening, you'll hear how I did. Some people talk about the day their world changed like it was a flash of lightning. A moment so bright and blinding that nothing could ever be the same again. For me it wasn't a flash. It was a quiet thud. A cast iron skillet hitting the floor. The soft collapse of a body too tired to fight anymore. The sound of beans boiling over and no one turning off the stove. I was 14 when Mama died. 14 years old and suddenly nobody's daughter. It was a Tuesday late spring. The air smelled like honeysuckle and smoke from the brush fire up near Route 9. I'd just gotten home from school and dropped my satchel on the counter when I saw her. Lying on the kitchen floor, her arm bent under her like a broken doll. She'd been cooking cornbread and soup beans. The skillet was still hot when I touched it, searing the pad of my finger. Her eyes were open, but they didn't see me. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember how long I stood there staring. I do remember Daddy coming in an hour later, smelling of tobacco and sweat, and seeing her there. He looked down at her body and muttered, "Goddamn woman didn't even finish dinner." Then he lit a cigarette, stepped over her, and went to wash his hands. That was the moment. The precise second I understood that I was alone in this world. And the world? It didn't care one bit. The coroner said it was an aneurysm. "Quick," he said. Painless. As if that made it better. At the funeral, they dressed her in a blue dress she never liked and laid her in a coffin she would have thought too expensive. Daddy paid in cash and didn't stick around after the service. Said he had sheriff business to attend to. The church was filled with folks who came to pay respects. Brought pies and casseroles and words that meant nothing. I stood there shaking hands and saying thank you like a trained parrot, all the while screaming inside. No one asked how I was. No one asked where I would go. Everyone just assumed I'd stay with him. Because he was her husband and my father. Because back then, a man's title was worth more than a child's safety. That night I slept on the floor next to her empty bed, clutching the corner of her quilt. The scent of lavender and ivory soap still lingered on her pillow. I remember whispering to the ceiling, "Mama, what do I do now?" No answer came. But I felt something, maybe it was nothing, maybe it was everything. A quiet warmth in the chest like a fading echo. Hold on, baby. Hold on. The next morning everything changed. Daddy woke me at dawn, not with a knock but with a kick to the heel. Up. Fire needs tending. Floors need mopping. You're the woman of this house now. I blinked, still caught between dream and grief. What? He tossed Mama's old house dress onto my chest. Put it on. I'm not. I started. His hand was around my wrist before I could finish. You are now. Unless you want to sleep in the shed. That day, I learned that grief does not protect you. It doesn't give you grace. It doesn't buy you time. Just makes you quieter. Easier to break. The following weeks were a blur. I wore her clothes, cooked her meals, cleaned her house. The townsfolk praised Daddy for keeping the household running. They called me brave for stepping up. Brave. I wanted to scream. Bravery isn't wearing a dead woman's apron while your childhood gets buried next to her. It's surviving. And sometimes that survival looks like silence. One night, about a month after the funeral, I was scrubbing the stovetop when he came in, drunk and mean. He stood behind me, close enough to smell the bourbon on his breath. You favor her, you know, he whispered. Same eyes. Same smell. She always smelled like bread and lavender. I froze. He brushed a hand over my shoulder and I flinched. You'll do just fine, he said and left the room. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Or the one after that. Because I knew. I knew what was coming. It was no longer if. It was when. There's a kind of terror that doesn't scream. It whispers. Creeps. It sits beside you at dinner and watches you brush your hair. It leaves bruises you can't show anyone. Not because they're hidden, but because no one's looking. That summer the sun never felt warm. And Oak Ridge Street, my quiet little home, became the loneliest place on earth. But even in that darkness, something inside me stayed lit. Some small ember Mama had left behind. A promise I made at her grave. One day I'll get out. I'll run. I'll live. And he'll never touch me again. There are moments in life when time doesn't just slow down. It splinters. Like glass breaking in slow motion. You see it coming piece by piece, and yet you're powerless to stop it. That night, my 15th birthday, was one of those moments. He'd been drinking since morning. I knew from the sound of the bottle hitting the table before noon, the way he shuffled through the house like thunder in boots. I stayed quiet all day, moved light on my feet, cooked the ham he liked with sweet potatoes on the side, just how Mama used to. He didn't say much at dinner, just chewed and stared. I kept my eyes down. I always kept my eyes down. When he finished his meal, he stood, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and said, "Come with me." I followed. Because what else could I do? He led me down the hallway to Mama's old bedroom. It hadn't been touched since her funeral. Not a sheet moved, not a drawer opened. The air inside was stale like dried flowers in grief. The lace curtains hung heavy with dust. Her rosary still dangled from the headboard. Her scent had faded, but something lingered. A trace like the memory of warmth in a cold room. He closed the door behind us and locked it. That click. I'll never forget it. It was the sound of safety leaving. He stood still for a moment, staring at the bed. Then he reached into the old wardrobe and pulled out her favorite dress. A pale blue thing with tiny white flowers, faded but still soft. He laid it gently on the bed like it was sacred. "Put it on," he said. I looked at him confused. "Daddy, you heard me. Terror is a strange thing. doesn't always make you scream. Sometimes it makes you obey. I didn't speak. I didn't move. So he moved for me. I won't tell you all the details. Not because I'm afraid you can't handle them, but because I still can't. Just know this. He didn't see his daughter in that room. He saw her. Mama. Delilah. The woman who'd cooked his meals and warmed his bed and walked too carefully through his life. Now that she was gone, he decided I would take her place. You're the woman of this house now, he said again as he unbuttoned his shirt. My body floated somewhere above the room. I saw myself from the ceiling, small, silent, unmoving. I imagined being the curtain, the floorboard, the bed frame, anything but me. Afterward, he left the room like nothing happened, wiped his hands, smoothed his hair, walked into the living room where a picture of Jesus hung on the wall, and poured himself another drink. I sat there on the edge of that bed, dress torn, soul shattered. There's a moment after violence where everything goes silent, even your heartbeat. I stared at the wall until it blurred. Then I whispered to the room, to no one, to her. Mama, I am not you. And I will not die in this house. That night I bled. But I did not cry. I walked barefoot to the bathroom and scrubbed until my skin turned red. I took off the dress and burned it behind the shed when he was passed out. It smelled like cotton and sin. And then I waited. Because now I understood exactly what I was dealing with. He never apologized. Never even mentioned it. The next morning, he tossed a biscuit on the table and said, "Get the laundry going. The preacher's coming by this afternoon." As if nothing had happened. As if I was made of stone. But I was not stone. I was something sharper. Something waking up. From that day on, he called me by her name. Delilah, hand me the salt. Delilah, don't burn the bread. Delilah, don't sass me. First I corrected him. My name is Georgia. The slap would come before I even finished. Eventually I stopped correcting him. It was safer that way. But inside, I repeated my name like a prayer. Georgia. 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 You are still here. In town, folks didn't ask questions. They saw the bruises, sure. They saw the way I walked 3 steps behind him. They heard how he called me Lila, and how I didn't flinch. But they didn't ask. Because in small towns, silence is safer than scandal. And the sheriff's business is nobody's business. But I was watching. And waiting. I started memorizing the way he locked the doors, where he kept the spare keys. I tracked the mailman's schedule. Counted the change in his wallet. I began to stash food. Hide a few dollars in the lining of my coat. Every small act of preparation felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Because I knew the day would come. The day I would leave. And never look back. There's a kind of violence that doesn't leave bruises. It seeps into the quiet parts of you. Your breath, your posture, your name. That's the kind of violence I lived with every single day after that night. I no longer existed as Georgia. To him I was Delilah now. His Delilah. A twisted resurrection of the woman he couldn't control in life, so he tried to possess in death. The transformation wasn't sudden. It happened little by little. First the clothes. He made me wear her dresses. Dresses that hung on my teenage frame like drapes on a child. He'd say, "You'll grow into them just like she did." He threw out my pants, my school sweaters, even my underthings. Burned them behind the shed while I watched. "You won't need these anymore," he said. "You're a woman now." But I wasn't. I was 15. I still had nightmares about spelling tests and scraped knees. I still missed my mama's voice when I couldn't sleep. But none of that mattered. To him I was a blank slate. A doll to dress. A body to bend. Next came the hair. He pulled out her old photo albums, pointed to pictures of her with long braids and red lipstick. "Do it just like this," he said. So I did. Because saying no wasn't safe anymore. He braided my hair himself some days, yanking the strands too tight, like he was trying to weave her ghost into me. He found her makeup tin in the bathroom drawer, the one with the cracked compact and nearly empty tube of rouge, and told me to use it. "She always looked like a lady," he said. "You will too." I applied it with trembling hands, looking into a mirror that no longer showed me. Then came the name. He stopped calling me Georgia altogether. In public it started with slips. "Delil Georgia, I mean." Then the slips stopped being slips. And I stopped correcting him. Because correction meant pain. And because part of me deep buried was afraid he really had erased me. One night, he came home with a bottle of cheap wine and 2 glasses, sat at the table and poured a drink for me. Said, "We never had a honeymoon, you and me." My stomach turned. I excused myself, said I felt ill. Locked myself in the bathroom and vomited until my ribs hurt. I curled up on the floor and whispered to the tile, "You are Georgia. You are not her. You are not his." But even as I said it, the truth was harder to hold. I was fading. Every day a little more of me disappeared. No school. No friends. No letters. Just chores, obedience, silence. If I looked too long in the mirror, I saw her. Not my mama, but the version of her he had created. And that terrified me more than the bruises. In town, people noticed the changes. They'd say things like, "You look so much like your mama. A real woman of the house now. That sheriff's raising a fine lady." I'd smile and nod, pretending not to hear the echoes of my own erasure. Only one person ever looked at me different. Mrs. Edna. She lived across the street. An old widow with more cats than teeth and eyes like needles. She'd been my mama's friend once. She'd watch me through her window as I hung laundry. Sometimes she'd wave. Sometimes she'd frown. One day she brought over a tin of biscuits and a mason jar of apple butter. Said nothing at first, just handed them to me and stood on the porch. Then in a low voice she said, "You're not her, you know." I looked up startled. She leaned in closer. "You're not Delilah. And don't let him make you think you are." I nearly dropped the jar. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away. It was the first time in months someone saw me, not the costume, not the mask. Me. That night, I cried for the first time since Mama died. Not because I was sad, but because for a brief moment I remembered who I was. And I knew that if someone else could see it, even just a flicker, then maybe I wasn't lost yet. I began to plan. Nothing drastic at first. Just small rebellions. I wore her lipstick slightly crooked, burned the toast, tucked a note into the hem of a dress I knew he wouldn't touch. Just a scrap of paper that said, "My name is Georgia." No one would ever find it. But I knew it was there. A secret seed. A buried truth. Waiting to grow. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but sometimes the eyes of a neighbor are the mirror you need to remember your own. Mrs. Edna Collins had lived across the street from us on Oak Ridge long before I was born. She was the kind of woman folks called nosy, but secretly relied on. She kept her curtains parted just enough to observe but not enough to seem obvious. If someone's dog went missing, Edna found it. If someone's boy got caught sneaking liquor, Edna knew before his mama did. She knew everything that happened on that street. Which is why I started to wonder, why hadn't she said anything sooner? The first time I realized she saw me was the day I tripped while bringing in firewood. The logs scattered and my skirt tore. I scraped my knee and sat there stunned, not from the fall but from the weight of everything else. I looked up and saw her standing across the street, behind her lace curtain. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just watched. And for the first time I didn't feel like I was alone in that house. Later that week she knocked on our door. It was the first knock we'd had in months. I panicked. Daddy was out back fixing the shed. I didn't know if I was allowed to answer. But she knocked again, firmer this time. So I opened. She held a plate of apple cobbler in one hand and a tin of tea bags in the other. "Your mama used to love this blend," she said. I nodded, unable to speak. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. That alone sent a chill through me. No one ever entered that house anymore. She glanced around quickly, her sharp eyes sweeping the room, taking inventory. "Just stopping by to check on y'all," she said loud enough for the backyard to hear. "Heard someone's been under the weather." I nodded again. She handed me the cobbler and tea, then leaned in close, her voice suddenly a whisper. "Is he hurting you?" My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't say yes. Couldn't say no. Couldn't say anything. But I didn't have to. She looked into my eyes and something passed between us, like a thread pulled tight. "I see," she said softly. Then she straightened up and added loudly again, "Tell your daddy I said hello." And just like that she was gone. That night I stared out the window for hours. I wasn't used to being seen, being noticed. Even in silence, Mrs. Edna had said more to me than anyone had in over a year. She began showing up more often. always with an excuse. Cornbread. Jelly. A spool of thread she accidentally bought 2 of. Each time she'd ask if I was okay. Each time I gave her nothing. But she never pushed. Just handed over the biscuits and looked me in the eye like she was telling me something without words. Eventually, she started leaving little notes tucked inside the bread wrappers or pinned under the jelly jar lids. I'm here. You're not crazy. When you're ready. It was Mrs. Edna who taught me the code. If you ever need me, really need me, hang a white sheet on the line out back. I can see it from my window. It was simple, smart, silent, like her. I never did use that signal. Not because I didn't need her, but because knowing it was there gave me enough strength to hold on one more day. One afternoon, she showed up with a bundle of herbs. Wound soothing, she said loud enough for Daddy to hear from the porch. Old country remedy for scrapes and sprains. He grunted from his chair, disinterested. Once inside, she unwrapped the herbs, and inside them was something else. A tiny folded paper. When I opened it later, it read, "Your name is still Georgia. Don't let him take that from you." I cried holding that scrap like it was scripture, because by then even I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. People talk about heroes as folks in uniforms or capes. But sometimes heroes wear curlers and bring over stale muffins just to check on your bruises. Mrs. Edna wasn't loud. She didn't burst in with the police or demand justice. But she stayed. She watched. She believed me even before I said a word. In that house I had no mirrors. Only his reflection of who he wanted me to be. But across the street, through a curtain and across a lawn of fading grass, there was someone who saw me clearly. And sometimes when the world doesn't give you freedom, it gives you a witness. And that's the first step toward getting out. Started with tomatoes. That's how most things begin in small towns. Simple, ordinary. So easy to overlook that you don't even realize your life's about to change. I was at Macmillan's market, clutching a basket of vegetables tighter than I needed to. Daddy had given me a list that morning and told me exactly how much I could spend, down to the last penny. He trusted me just enough to walk the 3 blocks into town, because fear, he believed, was tighter than any leash. I moved quietly through the aisles, eyes low, mouth shut. I avoided the stares of women I'd once called aunties, and sidestepped the boys who used to tug my braids in the schoolyard. And that's when I bumped into him. Literally. I wasn't looking, and my basket slammed into his stomach. "Whoa there," he said, steadying me before I stumbled back. "You runin' drills with that thing?" I looked up, into the kindest pair of brown eyes I'd ever seen. He smiled wide and crooked. "Sorry," I muttered, head down, stepping away. He extended a hand. "I'm Calvin." I didn't take it. "Georgia," I said, and just hearing my name out loud again. It felt like cracking a window in a room that's been locked for too long. He was new. That much was obvious. Nobody smiled that freely in Jasper Hollow unless they didn't know any better. Turned out, Calvin's uncle ran the hardware shop. Calvin had just moved in from Knoxville after dropping out of college. Something about needing space. Time. The kind of reasons only someone from outside our town would try to explain honestly. He didn't know the rules here yet. Didn't know which people to avoid, which names to whisper, which houses you never look directly at. Which meant he didn't know about mine. So when he saw me again the next day, this time sweeping the porch, he waved. I panicked and ran inside. That night, Daddy asked me why I was acting jumpy. I told him the truth. A stranger waved. He grunted. "Men'll wave at a pretty girl. Don't mean nothing." But it did mean something. Because that boy wasn't just waving. He saw me. Over the next week, I started seeing him more often. At the market. In front of the hardware store. Sometimes sitting on the bench across from the church, sketching in a notebook. He'd always nod. Sometimes say, "Hi, Georgia." Each time I felt a flutter of fear and something else. Something warmer. Recognition. Not that he knew me, but that he believed I was someone worth knowing. The first time we talked more than 5 words was behind the market, near the loading crates where I dropped a bag of flour. He saw me struggling and offered help. I refused. Politely. Then less politely. "I'm not trying to be a hero," he said, stepping back. "You just look like someone who hasn't been asked how they're doing in a long time." I looked at him then. Really looked. And he didn't flinch. We started meeting accidentally at first, then less so. Just a few minutes here and there. Never in public. Always somewhere in the in-between. Calvin would talk about books he was reading, his mama's cooking, how he hated thunderstorms but loved the sound of trains. And I would listen. Just listen. Because I didn't know how to speak my truth. Not yet. But I think he understood that. One day, he handed me a folded piece of paper. Sketch. It was me. Not me in mama's dress. Not me with red lipstick and braided hair. Me. Sitting on a bench hugging my knees. Eyes tired but open. You drew this. I whispered. Yeah, he said. Because that's how I see you. Not the ghost you pretend to be. I cried that night. Silently, face buried in a pillow. Because someone saw the cracks and didn't run. Of course, nothing stays secret in Jasper Hollow. Daddy didn't need proof. He smelled it. The change in my walk. The light in my voice. The fact that I dared to hum while washing dishes. He stormed in one night and grabbed me by the arm. You seeing someone? No, primelit. Of course not. His grip tightened. You better not be lying. I shook my head. He threw me against the wall anyway. The next time I saw Calvin, I had a bruise on my cheek and a lie on my lips. I fell. He didn't believe it. But he didn't push. Do you want out? He asked. I nodded. Barely. Then let's figure it out, he said. Just like that. As if escape was a math problem and not a miracle. That night, I whispered to Mama's photograph. There's a boy, Mama. And he sees me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my chains. And I began to wonder what it might feel like to cut them loose. In stories, escape always looks dramatic. A car speeding into the night. A suitcase flung out a window. A girl with wind in her hair and fire in her eyes. But real escape, the kind born out of years of fear, is quiet. Begins in whispers. In sideways glances. In code words. Mine began with a flower. Calvin and I knew we couldn't keep meeting like we had. Too risky. My father had eyes everywhere, drunk or not. His instincts were sharp when it came to control. So we started using symbols. Mrs. Edna helped us. One afternoon while Daddy napped on the porch, she stepped into the kitchen with a basket of herbs. She looked at me and said in that deliberate voice of hers, if ever you need me, really need me, just hang a white sheet. She paused. Her eyes held mine. But if the plan is ready, she continued, hang the hydrangea. I stared confused. She pulled a small potted plant from her basket, blue hydrangeas barely blooming, and set them on the windowsill. It was a perfect decoy. Everyone in Jasper Hollow had flowers. No one would notice one more. Except Calvin. The plan came together slowly, piece by piece, like stitching a quilt with threads of hope and terror. Calvin would pretend to offer me work. Laundry for the hardware store, mending pants for the workers. He'd pay in small cash, and I'd keep it hidden behind a loose board in the shed. My father didn't care much about the shed. Mrs. Edna used her church connections to contact her cousin, living near Chattanooga. She said the woman had a spare room, and no questions asked. All I had to do was get there. Alive. I started saving bits of food, dried apples, cornbread wrapped in wax paper. I found a pair of pants Mama had hidden deep in her old sewing trunk. Too big for me but real. Mine. I folded them tight and tucked them under the floorboard. Every detail mattered. I studied Daddy's drinking patterns. His boots by the door meant he'd be passed out within the hour. If they were gone, I didn't breathe until he came home. We planned my escape for a Tuesday. It was the day Daddy visited his friend in the next county, the only day he was usually out late. But he had to believe it was just another Tuesday. That's where the flower came in. Monday night, I placed the hydrangea in the front window. To anyone passing, it was just a plant. To Calvin, it meant it's time. That evening, my father was quiet. Suspiciously so. He didn't mention the flower. Didn't drink. Just sat on the porch whittling a stick, like he used to before Mama died. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. But something in his silence rattled me. That night I barely slept. At 3 a.m. I slipped out of bed. I had my bag ready. The pants, the food, a worn photo of Mama, and the money Calvin had paid me over the past 3 months. Not much, but it would buy a bus ticket. I moved like a ghost, Each step rehearsed 100 times in my head. My heart pounded like a drumbeat. When I reached the kitchen, I froze. The hydrangea was gone. The pot shattered on the floor. And standing beside it, arms crossed, was my father. I don't remember the first thing he said. Only the way he looked at me like he had known all along. He slapped me hard across the face. Then he dragged me back into Mama's old room. "You think you can leave me?" he snarled. "You think you can make me look like a fool?" I tried to run. He threw me into the dresser. Everything blurred after that glass fist's blood, the smell of whiskey and sweat. He locked me in the shed afterward, just like an animal. 2 days passed before Mrs. Edna came. She waited until she saw no movement in the yard. Then she slipped in through the back, calling my name softly. When she found me, bruised, bloodied, shaking, she knelt beside me and whispered, "You're not dying here, baby. You hear me? You are not dying here." That night, we didn't wait for a signal. We didn't wait for Tuesday. We didn't wait at all. Calvin and Edna carried me to the edge of town, hidden in the back of a borrowed truck. I was wrapped in a blanket, face swollen, eyes too tired to cry. When we reached the bus stop, Edna pressed something into my hand. It was a pressed blue hydrangea, flattened in wax paper. I looked at her. She nodded. "Freedom starts in small ways, baby. But once you've got it, you don't let go." As the bus pulled away, I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I had, I might have turned to stone. Instead, I looked forward. To whatever was next. To whoever I would become. To whoever I had always been. Georgia. Backhand index pointing right if you're still with me. Type continue. And I'll tell you what happened next in part 9. The night I stole myself back.
Bạn đã nói.
Continue.
Chat đã nói.
Sparkles part 9. The night I stole myself back. The bus roared down the mountain highway, leaving behind more than just a town. It left behind the scent of cornfields and whiskey breath. It left behind a name I never chose to wear. It left behind a house where I was someone else's ghost. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't afraid of where I was going. I was afraid of going back. I arrived in Chattanooga just after dawn. The streets were waking up. Bread carts, church bells, the low hiss of buses pulling in and out. I didn't have much. A paper bag of clothes, $22.75, a bus ticket stub, and a hydrangea, crushed between pages of my mother's Bible. Edna's cousin, Clara, met me at the station. She was older, 60 maybe, with sharp shoulders and a church lady hat that didn't quite fit her personality. She didn't hug me, just nodded and said, "Come on, child. Let's get you fed." Clara lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a sewing shop. The ceilings were low, the wallpaper peeled, but it was warm, safe. There were locks on every door. And she gave me the key. That night I took my first bath in clean water in over a year. I sat in that tub until the water turned cold, until my skin pruned, until I could no longer feel where the bruises ended and the healing began. And when I climbed into the creaky little twin bed in Clara's spare room, I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept. Without nightmares. Without listening for boots. Without flinching at floorboards. But survival is not the same as living. Over the weeks that followed, I struggled. The world had moved on without me. There were new songs, new fashions, new ways of speaking. And inside me, the old wounds still bled. I walked to the corner store and flinched at the sound of men laughing. I avoided mirrors. I ate slowly. I apologized too much. Clara noticed. "Girl, you ain't in Jasper Hollow anymore," she said one morning over oatmeal. "Ain't nobody ownin' you here." I nodded, but part of me didn't believe it yet. I got a job at a diner near the train station, scrubbing dishes, mopping floors. The manager, Miss Riini, was a tough black woman with a gold tooth and a heart too big for her apron. "You don't gotta smile if you don't want to," she told me once after I dropped a tray. "But you sure as hell don't gotta cower." She taught me how to carry myself like I belonged. How to speak up without trembling. She even taught me how to cook grits the city way. Creamy, slow, with butter and no apologies. But the real turning point came one stormy Thursday afternoon. I was closing up the diner when a man walked in. Broad shoulders. Pale shirt. Boots. My heart jumped straight into my throat. He wasn't my father. But he looked enough like him to freeze my body mid-step. I dropped the dish I was holding. It shattered. So did I. I curled into a corner of the kitchen, gasping for air. Miss Reaney rushed in, held me like Mama once did, and whispered, "You're safe, baby. You're safe." And in that moment something broke loose inside me. Something old. Something angry. I walked home in the rain that night. Didn't use my umbrella. Didn't run from the lightning. Let the storm soak me like baptism. And when I got to Clara's, I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote my name. Not Delilah. Not Lila. Not girl. Georgia May Hollis. Then I taped it to the bathroom mirror. So I'd see it every morning. So I'd stop forgetting. So I'd never let another man take it from me. A week later I enrolled in night classes. I didn't tell Claire at first. Just walked into the community center, signed my name on the dotted line, and picked up my textbooks. When she found out, she didn't scold me. She just smiled and said, "About damn time." Healing is slow. It doesn't come all at once. Some days I still woke up shaking. Some days I scrubbed my hands raw even though there was no blood to clean. But on the good days I remembered my voice. I began to hum again. First softly like Mama used to, then louder. One morning I even laughed at the radio. And just like that I realized I had stolen myself back. Not in a rush. Not in a scream. But in tiny acts of rebellion. One bath. One name. One page at a time. Backhand index pointing right. If you're still with me, type continue, and I'll tell you what happened next in part 10. The letter he shouldn't have sent.
Bạn đã nói.
Continue.
Chat đã nói.
Sparkles part 10. The letter he shouldn't have sent. It arrived on a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays were laundry days at Clara's, and I was elbow deep in warm water when she walked in with the envelope. She didn't say a word. Just handed it to me with lips pressed tight and eyes that didn't blink. There was no return address. Just my name. Georgia May Hollis. Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was all. And somehow it was enough to make my knees go weak. I stared at it for a long time. The envelope trembled in my hands. I knew that handwriting. Clean. Tight. Too neat for a man who worked with his fists. I didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to tear it into 100 pieces and throw it into the wind. But part of me needed to know. Inside were 3 things. A short letter. A folded photograph. A bus ticket. The letter read, "Georgia, I've been thinking about you. I know I wasn't always fair. I was grieving. You were too. We got twisted in it. I want to talk. Come home. Your daddy."
No επάλεγει. No confession.
Just come home. I unfolded the photograph. It was from years ago. Me at 6 years old, sitting on Mama's lap on the front porch. We were both smiling. I had a ribbon in my hair. Daddy had taken the photo. I remembered the moment like it was a dream from a different life. On the back of the photo, he'd written one word. Before. The bus ticket was for Jasper Hollow. Departure Friday. 2 days from now. Round trip. Like he thought I'd come running back and return the same night. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat there, the letter limp in my hands, and stared at the word Daddy until it blurred into nonsense. Clara didn't ask questions. She just placed a hot cup of tea in front of me and said, "You don't owe that man a damn thing." But I didn't know what I owed. To myself. To the truth. To the girl I used to be. So I walked. I walked through the streets of Chattanooga for hours that night. Past the diner. Past the train station. All the places I had rebuilt myself brick by brick. And when I stopped by the river, under the bridge lights, I took out the letter and tore it. Not once, but again and again until it was nothing but pulp in my hands. Then I let it go. I didn't take the bus. But I did write a letter of my own. This one didn't say, "Dear Daddy." It said, "You do not get to rewrite what happened. I was there. I remember. I survived. I am not coming back. Georgia." A few weeks later, a police officer knocked on Clara's door. "Are you Georgia Hollis?" he asked. My heart stopped. "Yes," I said. "But I'm not in trouble, am I?" He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Just letting you know. A man by the name of Hank Hollis was found dead last night in a motel outside Knoxville. Empty bottle. No ID. Just your name written on a napkin in his pocket." I stood there blank. "Did you know him?" he asked. I swallowed. No, I said. Not really. That night, I stood under the stars and whispered into the sky. You're free now, Mama. And so am I. Because the chain had finally broken. And the man who tried to own my name, my body, my life, was gone. The bus roared down the mountain highway, leaving behind more than just a town. It left behind the scent of cornfields and whiskey breath. It left behind a name I never chose to wear. It left behind a house where I was someone else's ghost. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't afraid of where I was going. I was afraid of going back. I arrived in Chattanooga just after dawn. The streets were waking up. Bread carts, church bells, the low hiss of buses pulling in and out. I didn't have much. A paper bag of clothes, $22.75, a bus ticket stub, and a hydrangea, crushed between pages of my mother's Bible. Edna's cousin, Clara, met me at the station. She was older, 60 maybe, with sharp shoulders and a church lady hat that didn't quite fit her personality. She didn't hug me, just nodded and said, "Come on, child. Let's get you fed." Clara lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a sewing shop. The ceilings were low, the wallpaper peeled, but it was warm, safe. There were locks on every door. And she gave me the key. That night I took my first bath in clean water in over a year. I sat in that tub until the water turned cold, until my skin pruned, until I could no longer feel where the bruises ended and the healing began. And when I climbed into the creaky little twin bed in Clara's spare room, I did something I hadn't done in months. I slept. Without nightmares. Without listening for boots. Without flinching at floorboards. But survival is not the same as living. Over the weeks that followed, I struggled. The world had moved on without me. There were new songs, new fashions, new ways of speaking. And inside me, the old wounds still bled. I walked to the corner store and flinched at the sound of men laughing. I avoided mirrors. I ate slowly. I apologized too much. Clara noticed. "Girl, you ain't in Jasper Hollow anymore," she said one morning over oatmeal. "Ain't nobody ownin' you here." I nodded, but part of me didn't believe it yet. I got a job at a diner near the train station, scrubbing dishes, mopping floors. The manager, Miss Riini, was a tough black woman with a gold tooth and a heart too big for her apron. "You don't gotta smile if you don't want to," she told me once after I dropped a tray. "But you sure as hell don't gotta cower." She taught me how to carry myself like I belonged. How to speak up without trembling. She even taught me how to cook grits the city way. Creamy, slow, with butter and no apologies. But the real turning point came one stormy Thursday afternoon. I was closing up the diner when a man walked in. Broad shoulders. Pale shirt. Boots. My heart jumped straight into my throat. He wasn't my father. But he looked enough like him to freeze my body mid-step. I dropped the dish I was holding. It shattered. So did I. I curled into a corner of the kitchen, gasping for air. Miss Reaney rushed in, held me like Mama once did, and whispered, "You're safe, baby. You're safe." And in that moment, something broke loose inside me. Something old. Something angry. I walked home in the rain that night. Didn't use my umbrella. Didn't run from the lightning. Let the storm soak me like baptism. And when I got to Clara's, I went to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote my name. Not Delilah. Not Lila. Not girl. Georgia May Hollis. Then I taped it to the bathroom mirror. So I'd see it every morning. So I'd stop forgetting. So I'd never let another man take it from me. A week later, I enrolled in night classes. I didn't tell Claire at first. Just walked into the community center, signed my name on the dotted line, and picked up my textbooks. When she found out, she didn't scold me. She just smiled and said, "'Bout damn time." Healing is slow. It doesn't come all at once. Some days I still woke up shaking. Some days I scrubbed my hands raw even though there was no blood to clean. But on the good days I remembered my voice. I began to hum again. First softly like Mama used to, then louder. One morning I even laughed at the radio. And just like that I realized I had stolen myself back. Not in a rush. Not in a scream. But in tiny acts of rebellion. One bath. One name. One page at a time. It arrived on a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays were laundry days at Clara's, and I was elbow deep in warm water when she walked in with the envelope. She didn't say a word. Just handed it to me with lips pressed tight and eyes that didn't blink. There was no return address. Just my name. Georgia May Hollis. Chattanooga, Tennessee. That was all. And somehow it was enough to make my knees go weak. I stared at it for a long time. The envelope trembled in my hands. I knew that handwriting. Clean. Tight. Too neat for a man who worked with his fists. I didn't want to open it. Part of me wanted to tear it into 100 pieces and throw it into the wind. But part of me needed to know. Inside were 3 things. A short letter. A folded photograph. A bus ticket. The letter read, Georgia, I've been thinking about you. I know I wasn't always fair. I was grieving. You were too. We got twisted in it. I want to talk. Come home. Your daddy.
No επάλεγει. No confession.
Just come home. I unfolded the photograph. It was from years ago, me at 6 years old sitting on Mama's lap on the front porch. We were both smiling. I had a ribbon in my hair. Daddy had taken the photo. I remembered the moment like it was a dream from a different life. On the back of the photo, he'd written one word. Before. The bus ticket was for Jasper Hollow. Departure Friday. 2 days from now. Round trip. Like he thought I'd come running back and return the same night. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat there, the letter limp in my hands, and stared at the word Daddy until it blurred into nonsense. Clara didn't ask questions. She just placed a hot cup of tea in front of me and said, You don't owe that man a damn thing. But I didn't know what I owed. To myself. To the truth. To the girl I used to be. So I walked. I walked through the streets of Chattanooga for hours that night. Past the diner. Past the train station. All the places I had rebuilt myself brick by brick. And when I stopped by the river, under the bridge lights, I took out the letter and tore it. Not once, but again and again until it was nothing but pulp in my hands. Then I let it go. I didn't take the bus. But I did write a letter of my own. This one didn't say, Dear Daddy. It said, You do not get to rewrite what happened. I was there. I remember. I survived. I am not coming back. Georgia. A few weeks later, a police officer knocked on Clara's door. Are you Georgia Hollis? He asked. My heart stopped. Yes, I said. But I'm not in trouble, am I? He shook his head. No, ma'am. Just letting you know. A man by the name of Hank Hollis was found dead last night in a motel outside Knoxville. Empty bottle. No ID. Just your name written on a napkin in his pocket. I stood there blank. Did you know him? He asked. I swallowed. No, I said. Not really. That night, I stood under the stars and whispered into the sky. You're free now, Mama. And so am I. Because the chain had finally broken. And the man who tried to own my name, my body, my life, was gone. After the officer left that night, I sat on Clara's porch for a long time, staring into the dark like it held answers. But all it held was quiet. No more footsteps on creaky floorboards. No more keys turning in locks. No more eyes watching from across the table. He was gone. And for the first time in my life, he would stay gone. The days that followed weren't filled with relief like I expected. I thought I'd dance. Thought I'd sleep deep. Thought I'd feel like the weight was finally lifted. Instead, I felt nothing. Numb. As if my body hadn't caught up to the news yet. Clara, in her usual calm, didn't press. She handed me a mop and said, If you can't cry, clean something. Grief hates chores. So I did. I scrubbed the floors. Washed the windows. Tended the garden. And little by little, I came back to myself. One morning, I took out Mama's Bible, the one I'd carried through everything, even if I hadn't opened it in years. Inside was the hydrangea, dried and crinkled, a memory of freedom pressed between verses of suffering and deliverance. I ran my fingers over the pages until I found something tucked in the middle. A small piece of paper I had forgotten. Mama's handwriting. Just one sentence. You were born to break the cycle. I sobbed like a child, because for the first time in years I knew I had. That summer I finished my GED. I walked across the stage in a cheap blue gown with my name called out loud and proud. Georgia May Hollis. The applause wasn't loud, but I didn't need it, because I clapped for myself inside. Mama would have too. With Clara's help, I got into a program to become a nurse assistant. She said it was fitting. You've been stitching wounds your whole life, baby. Now it's time to stitch others with healing. So I learned. I learned how to lift patients gently, how to speak with kindness, how to hold trembling hands. I learned that not all pain was visible, and not all healing was loud. By the time I turned 25, I was working full-time at Memorial Hospital, living in my own small apartment, and buying my own groceries with money I earned by the sweat of my own damn brow. Some nights I'd sit on my porch with a cup of tea and think about Jasper Hollow. Not the pain, though it never fully left, but the girl I was. The girl who endured. And then I'd whisper, "Look what we became, Mama." In time I made peace with the truth. I didn't need to bury it. I didn't need to hide it. I just needed to carry it differently. So I began telling my story, quietly, carefully. To women who had lived their own versions of it. To girls who thought they were alone. To shelters, churches, schools. Each time I felt lighter. Each time I remembered, silence was how he won. Speaking was how I survived. I never married. People always asked why. "You're so kind," they'd say. "So strong. Don't you want someone to share life with?" And I'd smile and say, "I already share it with the girl I saved." Because truthfully I had loved once. Loved deep. Loved enough to escape. That was enough. Still, there are days I think of Calvin. The boy with soft eyes and strong hands. The one who saw me when I didn't want to be seen. He never wrote after I left. Never called. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe he thought it was better that way. But sometimes when I'm driving down a long road with the windows down and the radio low, I wonder if he ever thinks of me too. And if he does, I hope it's with pride. 'Cause I made it. Now I sit on this porch, 73 years old, watching birds bathe in the birdbath Clara left behind when she passed. I keep a rocking chair beside mine, empty but not lonely, because in it sits Mama. And that little girl who once stood barefoot in the hallway, holding a torn dress and trying not to cry. And we rock together, soft and steady. Dear Georgia. Not the Georgia sitting on this porch with silver in her hair and crow's feet by her eyes. No, I'm writing to the Georgia who's still inside me. The one who used to sleep with her shoes on just in case she had to run. The one who learned to hold her breath every time she heard keys rattle in the door. The one who survived. I want to start by saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it took me so long to come back for you. You deserved more than silence. You deserve someone to storm the house, drag you out, and tell you loud and clear that love is never supposed to feel like that. But instead you had to save yourself. And you did. Every small decision, every bite you took, every lie you told to stay alive, every moment you chose not to give in was an act of resistance. You were your own rescuer. And that's something nobody can take from you. I remember the night we first heard the word no in our own voice. The night we dared to say, I won't be like her. I won't stay. You were so scared. But you did it anyway. And that's the very definition of courage. There are still days when I feel you stir in me. When a door slams too hard. When someone calls me girl. Like I don't own my name. When I walk into a crowded room and feel the instinct to shrink. But then I remember who we are. We are Georgia May Hollis. Not Delilah. Not his daughter. Not a secret to be hidden. We are not what was done to us. We are what we chose to become. If I could wrap my arms around you, little one, I'd hold you so tight. I'd let you cry until your ribs shook. I'd brush your hair and tell you all the things Mama never got to. That your worth is not in how much you endure. That kindness isn't the same as obedience. That forgiveness is a choice but survival is a right. And I'd whisper in your ear. You made it. Because you did. We did. These days I grow tomatoes in a little garden patch out back. Funny, isn't it? How something as simple as a tomato once changed everything. Sometimes I pick the ripest one and take a bite right off the vine. Let the juice run down my chin. No shame. No apology. Just joy. Because I'm allowed to take up space now. I still keep the hydrangea. Not the one from Edna, of course. That one crumbled years ago. But a new one. Grown from a cutting Clara gave me before she passed. I water it every Sunday. Not out of duty but out of reverence. It reminds me of the code. The escape. The moment we said, no more. It reminds me that even in the ugliest soil, something beautiful can bloom. To the girl still inside me. I love you. I honor you. And I will never forget you. You are not a chapter I've closed. You are the foundation I built everything on. You are the reason I became this woman. Whole, wounded, but free. To anyone listening now, anyone still trapped behind a locked door, you are not alone. The world may try to silence you, but your voice is still yours. Your story is still yours. And your freedom is waiting, quiet, patient, strong. You don't have to run. You just have to take the first step. Someone out there will see your hydrangea. Someone will open the door. Until then, keep breathing. Keep holding on. And if no one has said it yet, let me say it now. I believe you. I see you. And you deserve to be free. With all my heart. Georgia Cherry Blossom. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from or just say, I see you, Georgia. Means more than you know.